We'll call the finance meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Pat Kinney,
Here.
Blake Allison,
Here.
Dick Pufall. Was that a present?
You want to press your button? Do you have your button?
Yeah, he's here.
Here.
Brad Ray,
Here.
Ron Stender,
Here.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to approval of the agenda.
Brad will make a motion to approve.
Ron Stender will second. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, public comments. Is there anyone here for public comments? Anyone online or on the phone for public comments? Anyone online or on the phone for public comments? Hearing none, we'll go to 4 discussion and action items. The first one is approval of Finance and Economic Development Committee meeting minutes from February 6, 2025.
Move to approve.
I'll second that motion.
We have a second
Pufall.
from Mr. Pufall, first by Brad Ray. Any questions, comments, discussion? Ready to vote then? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we'll go to B, Financial Consultants Update. Steve and Mike.
Steve, I made you co-host.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us. Mike is out there too, I think, right? Mike?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. So under the item B here, Financial Consultants Update, we don't have a financial update for you this month, only because during this time of year, January, February, and March, there's not a lot of current year activity potentially that's going on. And so our plan is to do a first quarter for 2025 in April for you. And then we're working with Sue and Dan to make sure that things get to your audit firm, which they're going to be coming in, I think, and starting your audit in the next week or so. And then we will work with them. We'll file your state financial report for you. That's due by May 15th. And I think that's probably about the update right now. Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
No, we'll probably also be working with Highway a little bit on their closing and their annual report too. So I haven't had discussion with them yet, but so.
Yeah. I mean, the other item that we'll be doing for you is your ARPA report will be due, I believe, in April. So we'll work with Sue to make sure that gets filed accordingly. And we've had some, I'll call it internal discussion with the administrator. And Pat, I think you were on the email chain too, Chair Kinney there, regarding, we had planned to amend your report to move some funds from, you have 3 projects open on that ARPA funding. And I think what we're going to do is we're just going to claim it all as lost revenue, which you're eligible for. You had less than 10 million of ARPA funds. You had like roughly 3 million. So we'll just claim it all there rather than amend your report from last year, because with everything going on at the federal level, we don't want to make any move that would make it look like it wasn't committed by the end of the year. And Sue and I did reach out to the Department of Treasury in December to try to amend the report, and their portal for us to do that was not open, so we couldn't do it in a timely fashion. So I think it's my recommendation that we're just going to file it, get all the money for you for Ashland County. It'll be in your general fund, and then I think you had passed a resolution back in October that said you wanted to use some of it for your health insurance closeout, and we will certainly claim the funds, put them in your general fund, and then they will be unhindered funds, so you could move what you need then to assist with the health insurance closeout at the point in time that that's necessary. Does that make sense?
This is Pat. It does to me. Dan, do you want to give a brief background to what Steve just said?
Well, I just want to point out that we still do have about 150,000 obligated to do the elevator. We obligated that when we did the tuck pointing around the building. So that will still be used. But we were required by the federal government to allocate being state how we're going to spend the money by December 31st. So that is what we did on budget day last year. So everything should be good now.
Yeah, according to what we filed last April, we committed all the funds to projects. So you're fully committed. So there should be no question that you should get all your funds. We had intended to move some of the funds from one project to the other, but in light of the fact with what's going on at the federal level, I don't know that I would recommend doing that at this time. We'll just claim it under the projects we have. Either way, it ends up in your bank account, and then it's uncommitted. You can use it for whatever you want, which then you can follow through and use it for health insurance or whatever other purpose you wanted to.
There was an
Makes sense.
email in the past week that led to what Steve just said. It seemed better just to leave it there and not raise any flags that would suggest perhaps it wasn't committed when in fact it was. So just simpler this way, we hope.
Yeah, and we did, in fact, we do have the resolutions stating how we allocated all the money for asked.
Okay. Any questions for Mike and Steve? Blake?
I just want to say thank you guys. When I started here on this finance committee 4 years ago, I couldn't make sense of what the heck what we were talking about. But now I think through a lot of hard work on your part, these financial statements are making sense. If we look at that and if we go back to that a little bit, how do you guys feel our county as a whole is bought into the kind of, I say connectivity? I know Springbrook was a big part of it, and how we were doing that, but do you feel like we're kind of where we need to be?
Yeah, I mean, there's always room for improvement, but I think when you look back at where Ashland County was and where you are today, you've made great strides to better utilize your Springbrook software, which is your ERP, like your accounting and payroll software. So I think we're in a much better spot, both I would call it process wise within the county on how people process payments, payroll, receipts, things of that nature. And, you know, certainly there's always room for improvement. I will never say there's never room for improvement because there always is. And we will continue to work with the county. Matter of fact, a person just is going to be retiring who I would consider to be even more of an expert in Springbrook with reporting that, you know, I'm going to talk to Dan about possibly having her come up and like do a 1-day training thing for all the staff, the admin staff and people that would like to come and learn how to do. There are certain reports within Springbrook that are canned, and then there are ad hoc type tools, and she is a very high level expert at doing that sort of thing. And I think it would be extremely beneficial to your staff to have an immersion in that for a day to really see what it can do. So, but yeah, we're still working, you know, behind the scenes to try to get things, nudge them along down the road. And we are in a much better spot financially too, because I think when we came, the impetus behind us coming was, you know, the county was in a financial kind of quandary, mainly because of the Sanborn tax issue. But then, you know, to improve cash flow and to strengthen your financials, the other efficiencies were put in place to assist with that. Mike, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that Steve and I are working less hours for the county, which means we're billing you less. And that's a good thing because we're not needed as much because of some of the improvements you made, especially in the area of budgeting, capital improvement program, things like that. You know, the county's been able to grab onto that and do a lot and do more than it did in the past. So, and we feel it's in a much better process and procedures. So,
Does that answer your question?
Yeah,
Blake?
I think I hear a lot of things that kind of has resonated through with what I've been able to see. And so I get it. And I think, you know, as we come into the end of the year and there's maybe some changes in your guys' future, changes, you know, I think I just want to say it's been helpful for us to have people like you that have that outside expertise to get us kind of pointed in the right direction. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments? Then we'll move to item C, consolidation of fund accounts.
Yeah, thank you. So Blake, this is another recommendation that we have. If you look in your financial statements that Kerber prepares for the county, they roll all of these funds that are on this sheet here before you into your general fund. There's no legal requirement to keep them separate. And in some cases, I think it further complicates things to have it separate for most of these because it's like you're putting tax levy in for like uniform allowance when it could just be budgeted in the sheriff's department. We don't have to create a separate fund. I mean, I think in the beginning it was well intended to track things, but as time goes on, I think, and as you're using your software to your advantage, it makes sense to close these back to the general fund. It'll match your financial statements you produce from Springbrook would then match your audit report, as opposed to now, if you ran, say, a statement for your general fund, you'd have to add these all in to tie out to your audit report. So our recommendation is to close them out back to the general fund and just leave the activity there. As kind of a why are some red, why are some green? That was my methodology to say the red ones have a deficit in the fund. So when we close that out, it's actually going to be the general fund is going to absorb that. If it's green, it means that it has some fund balance available. So that will add to the general fund. So overall, our recommendation is to combine those back to your general fund. I'd be willing to answer any questions anybody had.
This is Pat, and my question is, if you do this while the two of you are still working with us, does that make it simpler for staff after you are no longer with us? Because I hear that you folks are looking to retire at some point.
Well, so I believe it makes it simpler for your staff because if you think about it, like the addressing or trees and shrubs, I mean, the departments that deal with those activities, by having stuff in separate funds, it complicates it to the extent that, you know, oh, this goes to that fund, this goes to the other fund. If they're all in the same fund, it just keeps it a little simpler for everybody in the departments. And there's no requirement to keep these separate. So why would you complicate it that way, I guess is our rationale. And we are not going anywhere like tomorrow. But you know, because it came up, you know, it is something that, you know, at some point we probably will fade into the sunset. And one thing I'll just kind of bring up here is if you recall back to the original report that we did, there was some discussion about creating a finance position for the county. And so we have broached that subject with your county staff there to potentially look at that and possibly, you know, if the committee could consider that at a future meeting, we see a benefit to, if that could occur, for us to work with that person and to mentor that person so that while we're here, we can pass along knowledge to them to kind of shape them into a finance director for you.
Questions, comments? This is an action item, so I assume we're looking for a motion on whether to approve the change or not. Blake,
I'll make a motion to consolidate the fund accounts into the general fund.
Brad will second.
any further discussion or comments? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we'll go to tax bill discussion. When I got my tax bill last December, my county increase, and I'm going to ask the city of Ashland, it was up 5.1%. And I wasn't expecting that because when we passed the budget, it was pretty close to flat and even. So a good chunk of the explanation lies in equalized values. So values in the city of Ashland have been going up relative to the rest of the county more so than otherwise. And then the town of La Pointe actually went down by 10%, I believe. But with the numbers that Dan sent out, or he sent me some files, and there's one sheet here in particular, that accounts for 3.4% of the 5.1% increase. So that's right at 2/3 of the increase. And I don't want to necessarily delve into great detail here, but I'm curious why I'm not understanding where that full 5.1 came from. I know Gary's went down. He wants to tell me why.
Well, yeah, and a lot of it has to do with how close your assessment is to the 100%. The state steps in at some point and tells towns, villages that your assessed value has fallen too far below the 100%. Usually it's 90, 85, and then they reassess you. What happened recently in my area, and because I've had the same calls, is the town of Agenda where I live, we were reassessed a year ago. Our taxes are actually now less than the town of Chippewa next door because they're at under 90% or whatever, and they have to be reassessed at some point. Then they'll come back up, even though their equalized value as a town is higher. So some of that can be that. The other problem that we saw this last fall is that people were complaining about taxes from other sources of government, and that's because lottery credit and the school credit went down, so you had to make that up. But in some of these cases, it's because wherever the city, in your case, city of Ashland's assessed, supposed to be at 100%. They let you fall down until it gets to a certain point. The state steps in and says, you either do the reassessment or we'll do it for you. Then your assessor comes along and reassesses. Now, your assessment can go up. Say it's you and Dan that live in the city. Your assessments could go up, but one of you might pay more than the other because of your assessed value. I mean,
Well, so I understand. I mean, and then if there's businesses or buildings that went away, there's all of that. And so it's going to shift every year. What I don't understand is when I look at the file in the packet, the one titled 24 versus 23 taxes. So even all that assessment is shifting because of equalized value. If those equalized values they use, whether they're within the 10% or not, and they come up with these numbers, that's only 3.4 of the 5.1 explanation. So
The remainder of that still has to do with equalized value. Now, the city of Ashland just finished doing a reassessment. They did it over, I think, a 4 or 5 year period, and they just finished. And what that does is, while the equalized value may change and go up, like, so my property value went up, Blake's property value went up because of the assessment, but other people, their assessment went down. So, somebody who was assessed at $150,000 is now assessed at $100,000. If you're still at 120,000, well, you're still gonna end up paying more in taxes than the person whose assessment went down. And assessments go down for numbers of reasons. One is neighborhood, one is condition of the house, one is habitability. Is there even a structure on there anymore? A house gets raised and the land value goes way down. So that's where the other part comes in, where some houses go up in value, some go down in assessed value, which is why your taxes are not exactly going to be the the 3% based on equalized value. It's going to be based on where you are and where your house is assessed in the entire assessments of the city.
So I understand they're going to shift for all those reasons, but when I look at this document of 2024 versus 2023 and the taxes that we're going to collect, the city of Ashland, 1 year is 3.468 million. And then the other year before 3.354. So that's all the dust settling for everything with assessments, whether they're accurate or not. But that's only 3.4 of the 5.1. So I understand why it shifted more to the city of Ashland, but where's the other?
Again, it's the assessments within the city of Ashland, where some houses are getting assessed more and some are getting less. And if you haven't changed, you're still going to see an increase if other properties went down.
But isn't that reflected in our equalized values that we get in the summer?
It's reflected as a whole in equalized value, but for your individual property, your taxes
But
can
no,
be,
but all of our county taxes in the city of Ashland went up 5.1%.
So I think what's happening is we're individually getting stuck on our own taxes, and
Yeah.
some complications within yours are Northwood Tech, School District of Ashland. And I'm just saying, so if we go to this document right here, right? This equalized value 23, 24 versus Town of LaPointe went down from significantly, right? From 22% of our equalized value down to 19. So their equalized value went down by a lot. So the amount of the taxes that are coming from LaPointe now are way down. Whereas what Pat is saying is that, oh, wait, City of Ashland, they went from 3.28 up to 3.45. And that's going to be borne on the people with the most valuable properties, which is what Pat has and I have. So that's where that's why your taxes are going up, because mill rates and everything else. But
Yeah.
we're not talking about that, Pat. This is an important document. I'm trying to understand, how is LaPointe equalized value going down so significantly while the city of Ashland, and that was my question.
well, that has to do with the sale prices of homes. So houses are assessed on a cycle, like Chairman Mertrick said, when they get below 85% or so. But houses are also reassessed when they're sold. So if you buy a house, your assessment's going to change because you just set the new market value on that house. And so the assessor has to make a change. So in the case of LaPointe, houses weren't selling for as high a price. So their assessed value went down. Yeah. Whereas in the city of Ashland, prices keep going through the roof. I mean, it's,
I think that's part of why it's a little bit slower sales down there, right? And so if you're not seeing sales, those properties aren't going up at the rate like I'm seeing mine on Junction Road. No help, nothing, other than tax equalized value.
yeah. And it's the fairest way it can be and based on assessments. I mean, I know I have some friends who are really upset about their tax rate. And I think the assessor probably made a mistake on theirs, but that's the way it is. I mean, it went up because the equalized value went up. It went up because
But
individual changes in the city happened. And so,
I asked you, and I believe I asked Blake, I know I asked Dick, and we were all at 5.1.
yeah, that's just the way it is.
And yet the overall taxes to collect is up 3.4.
Right.
Well, we'll leave this at this, but it's still a mystery that I still would like to understand better.
All right, maybe,
Maybe Steve and Mike.
no,
Your final exam question.
no, Bill Metzinger, maybe he can explain it.
I guess if I could look at more tax bills,
You can.
I can.
Just go on GIS.
Okay,
Just go on GIS.
All right.
Yeah, I think, Dan, I would just, maybe if it's okay.
Yeah.
So what you're talking about is a very complex situation and it doesn't always make sense. Equalized value is typically only used for the county and like the tech college to apportion its levy to the districts that it's serving. So in the case of Ashland County, every town, city, village is going to get apportioned a share of your levy. Now, in the case of, what I'm hearing here, and I haven't seen any of your data, so, I'm just going by what was said. If LaPointe, if their equalized value went down and the city of Ashland went up, if you think of it like a slice of pie, the city of Ashland is going to get apportioned a bigger dollar amount of the county's levy, okay? And LaPointe's would go down because they're a smaller slice of the pie. Then, once that's apportioned, then it is sent to those districts, and then they use their assessed valuation to calculate their local rate. And that's where what Dan was explaining, and I think Blake, and pardon me if I'm saying the wrong name, I can't see faces, I can only hear voices, but that's where if, say I have a house and I put up a garage on my property and the assessor came out and increased my assessment, or somehow caused my assessed value to go up, my slice of the pie for the city of Ashland now is bigger. And or if other properties are being reduced by the assessor, which for whatever reason a house burnt down, what have you, I think whole scale changes have to be done through a revaluation, and that's where I heard, like, if your equalized value, your percent to assessed goes down to 90 or 85, the Department of Revenue will step in and tell you to do it, or they'll do it and bill you for it. So within those numbers, within each entity, your slice changes based upon what happens to the other slices, the other parcels. And certainly it doesn't hurt to look at other ones. I think the rate, Pat, I think if you're seeing like 5.1 on every bill, that probably is the percentage that occurred for the rate in that district, which should be the same. And then how it affects each bill would be based upon their assessed value.
Well, I'll leave it at that. I've read that Department of Revenue stuff and I've noticed you use some words that they use, so I'll continue to delve into this because I can't help myself, but we'll move on in the meeting to E, new vehicle for the land conservation.
Mary Jo, would you like to come up?
Hi, everyone. Land Conservation Department, we had a vehicle total loss this winter. One of our staff was hit by another vehicle. It totaled our land conservation vehicle. We have 6 staff in the office. We typically have 3 vehicles that we run on a regular basis, field work. We haul a boat with one of them for work in the summer. We haul a no-till drill farm planting machine with another vehicle. And then we have 2 other staff that are typically in the field all summer. So we did receive an insurance payout for $25,000 or $26,000 for that vehicle. We're looking to replace it. So we have gotten a couple of estimates on trucks that would be able to haul the equipment that we have. And so I have a couple different options to present to you today. One of them is a brand new vehicle through Don Johnson. It's on the lot in Hayward. The off the lot walkout price would be $44,479. It's a brand new vehicle, a 2025 with 2 miles on it. It's a GMC Sierra truck. The large engine, it would be able to haul the no-till planter. It would also be able to haul the boat. It's a crew cab, so it could also haul our staff. Once again, that price on that government deal was $44,479. There's also a used Chevy Silverado at Ashland Ford Chrysler. That is a 2018 with almost 72,000 miles on it. And they'd be willing to let that go for $26,500. So basically, I want to make a decision. We're going to need a vehicle within the next month.
So we did get an insurance check for $22,554.50 from the old vehicle. So the question we had is, do we want to purchase, since we have this huge, half the cost of a brand new vehicle, or do we want to lease? I would advise making a decision immediately, because any truck that's sitting on the lot is pre-tariff. Anything that crossed the border as of yesterday is tariffed. So, I will say that they keep their vehicles for years and years.
Yeah, we're averaging about 20 years for our trucks. As long as we don't get hit. We have 2 vehicles right now. Yeah, we have, we had all brand new vehicles. So we have a 2019 Ford Ranger. We're averaging about 10,000 miles a year per vehicle. We have a 2019 Ford Ranger. We have a 2021 Dodge Ram. And then this was, the vehicle that got totaled was a 22 Ford Edge. But the Ranger that we have does not have towing capability. So that is set up for our engineering technician. It has survey boxes in the back, and that's mostly used for farm visits and does not have the towing capability. So then that leaves us with a Dodge Ram and we have 2 different machines between the boat that we use multiple times a week in the summer and the no-till farm planter that both require towing capability.
Blake?
Can you even, do we not lease now? Is that not what we do? Again, I don't know, because we, as a sheriff's group, I thought that they were talking us that this is, and I think the financial guys may have even guided us that was more beneficial as a county, but maybe I'm missing that.
No, no, you're not missing it, and that's the decision you have to make. Given that we have $22,500 to put towards a vehicle, do we want to lease a vehicle that's going to get, what did you say, 10,000 miles a year? And they get over a decade of use out of them. Yeah. Right. That's kind of
Microphones,
why the
please.
questions for you.
I'm okay buying the vehicle. I don't have a problem. I want to make sure that we don't get, because it seems like we've had this discussion now about the buy versus lease, and there hasn't been a lot of consistency depending on department. I think we only, unless it's sheriff only leases now, right?
Sheriff only leases now, but I could see in the future doing highway too, their trucks.
But I do see the benefit of owning, so I would say the Don Johnson vehicle, brand new at that price, with 22 down, I think that would make sense, but that's just me.
I lean towards purchase too. When we have 22,554 already, we might as well go ahead and use that for a new vehicle. And I don't see why getting a 7-year-old vehicle with 70,000 miles on it. I think just get a brand new one. It would be nice if we get a brand new one in the county so that we can, get some of that tax revenue back on us then. So, but, yeah, I think, so I'll make a motion that we, assuming we have funds in contingency to cover.
We have funds in contingency, and we have general fund monies that we can use too.
Yeah, then I'll make a motion that we buy the new truck, the GMC with 2 miles on it.
Before you get a second, Mike, Steve, do you have a preference of where we would pull the 20-some thousand from?
I would say we have it in contingency. I would go there first.
Okay. Can you put that in motion then?
There is also the 20-something thousand in the tree and shrub account.
I'll second.
Second
I-
by Ron and then Mary Jo.
There is revenue funds that were left in the tree and shrub account too. that are being proposed to go back to the general fund right now.
Yeah, so I mean, I would just chime in on that. If you take it out of contingency, it's coming out of general fund too. So either way, it kind of works the same. Does that make sense, Mary Jo?
Yes.
Okay.
I just would like to offer a friendly amendment to my own amendment that it comes out of contingency fund, Ron, if you're all right with that second.
Microphones, please.
Ron, are you okay with the friendly amendment that the funding comes out of contingency?
Yes.
Okay. And we are going to recognize Mr. Boussaint.
Just thinking financially, if we take things out of contingency, I don't know if that ties our hands later in the year when we might need contingency for something else. Just want to say that.
We put $200,000 into contingency. So we will have, the only thing we're planning on using part of that for is the planning. So.
Go ahead.
So if I could make a suggestion, because we have a couple things happening here potentially, buying a new vehicle, and the financing of that vehicle, and then amending the budget, because wherever we charge the payment to buy the new vehicle, we should amend the budget to appropriate the 44,000 some dollars to, so some of it's going to come from the insurance proceeds, and then the other amount would be coming from contingency to fund the transaction to purchase the vehicle. Does that make sense?
It does. Are you suggesting that in what action we take today that we change the motion to reflect all of that?
Yeah, I would recommend if you approve the purchase of the vehicle using the two funding sources and amending the budget to reflect that action, I think is sufficient.
Brad?
I'd like to amend my motion. But wait, Dan, do you have?
I'm just trying to think, if we amend the budget, does it have to go to the county board? And if it does have to go to the county board, it needs a 3/4 vote.
Well, I think that depends on what budgetary account we're paying it out of, because I think there's a percentage that it can change within the account. Mike, are you still out there?
Yes, I am, but is it 10% of a budget can be moved by a committee? Isn't that?
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we're going to be a
So
little
if
bit over if we use contingency. That's,
Could we, if the committee is interested in the purchase, do you think Don Johnson would accept an agreement where we have to wait till the end of April? We have a meeting the 29th or so for a final vote.
I just have a question. If the department has money they're going to put into the contingency fund, and that's what it's, or general fund, and that's where you're going to take the money from, does that make any difference?
well, so what if we use, so we use the 22,000 for sure, and that means we need 24 more thousand, right? There's a 40,
The insurance check was 22,500.
5, and you're
And the
46.
new vehicle's 44,479.
Okay,
Let's call it 44,500.
right. So we need 22,000.
Yeah.
So Dan, are you thinking like take 19,000 from contingency, it keeps it below 10, and then just use the tree and shrub fund?
Yes, something like that.
different- And
Something like
and-
that, yeah. Or just
yeah.
use the tree and shrub fund, period.
Oh, okay.
because that's in her
That's
budget.
what I was suggesting. I mean, we're
Okay.
giving 29,000 back, about 29,000, 28,000 back to the general fund
Yeah,
in that tree and shrub account.
yeah,
I think that way we could avoid the county board having to vote on amending the budget.
sure. So then my suggestion would be is to the motion that's made to approve the purchase utilizing the insurance proceeds and the tree and shrub fund monies prior to transfer back to the general fund, and then we'll just close out the balance of it, whatever is left. Does that sound right?
So I think it might be easier just to withdraw my original motion
Sure.
and make a new motion. I move that we buy a new truck from Don Johnson at the cost of $44,479, using the $22,554 from the insurance and the remaining budget of that from the tree and shrub fund prior to putting the tree and shrub fund back into the general fund. The reason for this motion is to expedite the purchase because of all the changes that are going on that we don't have time for the county board to fully weigh in on a budget change.
Is there a second?
Ron will second.
Any further discussion? So this is Pat. Regarding the lease vehicles, we're leasing the squad cars. And when we first looked at that, I did some reading online from other sources. And because our squad cars were in this pool of other squad cars and vehicles in the state, and we're on the end of the state with the worst roads, the worst weather, the most salt, by putting it into that pool and looking at the maintenance that we were doing on squads, from what I looked at on the data, we actually were getting into a pool for us. It was beneficial to lease because of the pool we were in for the rates that we would otherwise pay. In this case, because we would keep it so long, I would agree with the purchase and doing that. But I do got a question, Mary Jo. Would a half-ton truck pull that no-till drill as long as you don't go too fast?
Probably. I'd need to know what the towing capacity is of the half ton. The no-till weighs about 3,500 pounds.
Usually about 10,000 pounds for a half ton.
Okay. So yeah, we've been looking at the towing capacity. Right now we are towing it with a Dodge Ram that has a 3.6 liter engine. And it struggles a little bit, especially, I mean, we're driving it to Superior, so more hilly country. But the other advantage of anything that you're towing with for that piece of equipment is it cannot be towed over 20 miles an hour because of the wheel bearings on it. So you're already towing at extremely low speeds.
Okay.
But the vehicle we are towing it with now, you can tell the weight that you're pulling, and it's putting extra torque on it.
So if someone's going through the White River Dam and going up that hill with a half-ton, would they make it?
Yeah, they'd make it, but
Mhm.
I don't know what you're gonna do to the transmission,
I'll
you
find
know,
out.
over time.
Can you
Ron?
check out and on the list to see what type of gear ratio it has? Because that makes a huge difference. I have a Dodge Ram, but I tow a 27-foot boat with it, but I have 3.92 gear ratio. The higher the ratio, the easier it is to pull something, so. That it should say right on there.
A quick Google search says that the towing capacity of this 25 GMC Silverado 1500 can tow 13,300 pounds.
Yeah, we know that this vehicle has more than capability. I mean, this vehicle, it is more than what we actually need to tow it. But we're basically comparing that to a used vehicle that's on the lot at Ashland Ford right now. So it's coming down to, do you want to purchase a brand new vehicle for 44,000? You know, or do you want to purchase a used vehicle?
You're good. It's got a trailer towing package.
Yeah, we made sure to only look at
So
towing hitches, so.
Okay. Ready to vote then? Dick?
Couple of questions. Now this, truck from John Johnson's, is that a 24?
25 has 2 miles on it.
So it's brand new, virtually brand new. It seems rather reasonable, $44,000 for a four-wheel drive pickup.
They're giving us a government rate. The MSRP is $50,100. So they're giving us the government deal because it's a brand new vehicle. That's how we've purchased all of our vehicles, is usually getting a government bid rate. But the used vehicle, the used truck, we cannot get a government rate on that because it's already a used vehicle. We only get that on brand new purchases.
The other question I had, I assume you exhausted the search locally, so we don't get a lot of kickback on this because Don Johnson is not in Ashland County.
Just the point, we wouldn't get a kickback on it because it's a tax-free sale.
What?
It's a tax-free sale. We don't, Ashland County doesn't pay sales taxes.
Yeah, so every vehicle we purchase is tax exempt. So there'd be no benefit to the county financially from taxes, in sales tax. And we're also getting a lower rate on the vehicle because we're getting a government discount.
That's a really good price. That's all I got.
All right, ready to vote then? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we will go to item 4F, goals and priorities for 2025 and beyond.
Just want to open for debate here. What do you guys want to see going forward? Now, Pat and I have talked a little bit about it.
Well, housing had been a big item, but most of you or all of you already know that in the city of Ashland, they're proposing to build a 130 to maybe 150 unit apartment complex starting this year with apartments available late next year. So,
And that's not all. The old CISA building
yeah.
is going to be converted to apartments too. That'll be probably 4 or 5 years down the road after the library project is done.
Brad?
I'll just say that CISA building will be open about a year from now.
Yeah, I think
So I don't know what
it
the
has to do with
renovation would cost, but,
I think it has to do with borrowing capacity of the city.
oh, okay.
I was going to talk about that in my update, but I can do it here. And I just, does everybody understand what a TID is? Do I need to go over that, a TID? Okay. All right, so a TID is when a municipality creates a special taxing district. It has to be a contiguous area. As you see, the cities here is. This is the brownfield across from the police station, I believe. And this is the CISA building. And these houses are within it too. What happens is you have a base property value on the district. So that base property value, we'll just say it's $1,000 to make life easy. So today it's $1,000. The county school, the city tech school will continue getting their portion of that $1,000 throughout the life of the TIF. So we don't lose any money on it. However, once improvements are made on the property, so on here, the big brownfield, when they put those apartments up that are going to open up in October, the value of that property is going to increase dramatically. Like by tens of millions of dollars increase dramatically. That creates a much higher tax rate because of the property improvements. So the increased value is called a tax increment. All right, that tax increment or increased value above the base is kept by the TID district. It's used to pay for expenses within the TID. So it can be used for infrastructure, like the city's going to have to move sewer lines, and they have to put sewer and water in there to do the construction. They're probably gonna have to do some road work to make the TID more accessible. All that cost will be paid for with the TID. The city also has the opportunity, and if you down here, and I'll blow it up a little bit. So here's what here's what they think the TID is going to be and how much increment's going to come out each year. Now, this is an estimate. Let's be honest. If taxes can go up or down. So the city will use all this increment here, which comes to $19 million over the life of the TID, which is until 2051, to pay for all those improvements. They could also use that money to give it as a development incentive to the developer. So here, in this case, they're planning to give the developer $3.5 million towards the cost of building the project or paying the taxes or however money's fungible. So they're giving them $3.5 million. And then they're going to give, I believe, there's also going to be other money granted for the CISA building. So the important thing to note is if you look at this map, the TID, not only can it pay for all the infrastructure within the actual district itself, pay incentives to the developer, it can also be used on any project within a half mile of the TID. So this TID essentially lets the city do public improvements in downtown Ashland also. So if they were to find a buyer for the 514 building, they could provide an incentive to that buyer to fix the building up. They can also use that money for any other business development that happens within a half mile of the TIF. So they're using that $19 million in increment they're going to get to not only do this one project, but they can do it all around within a half mile, all around the city. So that money is actually going to be used for other projects too down the road, which will bring more dollars to the city, the county, and the school district. It'll provide new businesses. It'll provide new housing opportunities. They could provide money for another housing project within a half mile. Now, I know Mr. Kenny's worried about how they pay for it, given the city's current debt load. The city is planning on borrowing $3.775 million in general obligation bonds. The question I asked of Ellers, because I've known the guy for a long time, is why they're not using TIF revenue bonds. So instead of the full faith and credit of the city going on it, it's going to be the TIF itself it's the credit of the TIF, not the city. So they are going to look at that option, which would enable the city to do a little bit more stuff and keep their debt load lower and keep my taxes lower and yours lower and yours lower. And but in general, this is what a TIF does. It helps developers create value on the tax rolls, and it creates new business. And in this case, it's going to create desperately needed housing in the city.
So this is Pat. I wouldn't use the word worried. It was just well aware that they're going to borrow more money and they're going to have to get the project rolling. But in the long run, yes, it'll be a good thing. So I'm supporting it.
Yeah.
But it's just one more thing that comes at a time that's been busy. Our board chair has a question.
Yeah, actually I have three, and part of that's been answered, but when you go back to the list of the initial startup costs, like right there, That's the biggest question I'm getting asked, and it's kind of strange they're asking me, but they're saying, okay, where is that 3.2 coming from? Where's the 3.5 coming from? Where's the 4.8, so on and so, because they've seen that. So that's a question. If
Well-
they're going to borrow it, then I can give them an answer. Then if you go back to the map of the area that they're talking about developing, they've got this row of houses. The question coming from some of the residents is, wait a second, Gary, if that's your house, looks like they're going to take that house.
There is, I did, well, I sent the finance committee and Chairman Mertig the big plan, the 31-page one. There is a possibility that the condemnation will be used.
Because if you go to that block on Beaver, there's
Yeah,
9
there's-
or 10 homes there, and somebody called me and says, what if that's your house, Gary? Are they gonna take it? I said, I don't know that answer. You might want to call the city.
That's the
Because I-
city's, that's the city, and I don't believe their plan is to take those homes. They're in the district to make it contiguous
Okay. and
because
then-
they need to get from, let me go to the close-up. They need to be able to get from
Yeah, see that,
lot 1, which is
Right.
where the apartment's going to be, to lot 14.
right, and that
would-
that leads to the third question they've asked. That Beaver school, as Brad started talking about, that's already being remodeled. So
Well,
how do they get involved in that when this project manager's already sheetrocking that building?
Well, this, isn't this building where the library is right now? Yeah, so this is where the city moved the library temporarily.
Right. Well,
Um,
we're talking the big, long building. I'm talking about the Beaver School. Is that involved in this TIF?
um,
Because the school building's already being remodeled.
right, well, let's.
No, there's the old school building and the new school building.
Correct.
The library's in the new school building right
Right.
now.
Right,
But
The
the
old
old,
school, I don't know, are they doing? work
right,
there?
right now, that's just people renting the space, doing various
well, they're
things like,
sheetrocking in the old school building, the multiple story building.
yeah,
That's why I wondered if that becomes part of the TIF. Is
I-
that landlord must be involved in this?
yeah, that's Larry Cicero, and he is involved in it.
Okay.
So-
And that gives me an answer. My answer to those people calling me is call the city.
Yeah, call the city,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
But I don't think these houses right here, 5 through 13, are going to be taken. They're in there so they could keep the whole district contiguous.
But is there, like, by creating this district, that is a possibility that the houses could be taken by,
It's always a possibility.
when you create these?
But the city does not plan to do so at this time. Could they decide to do so 20 years from now? I don't know. They certainly, I don't think they would, if they were planning to do that, I think they would make the owners an offer that was above market value to fairly compensate them. So, I really don't think that's an issue at this point. They're concentrated on lot 1 and then later lot 14.
Blake?
So I'm I'm fairly excited to have something like this. The developer is done these projects in larger towns, and so this helps us, I
Mhm.
think, validate them. The one thing that I guess I'm missing is Ellers is the financial advisor.
Yeah.
And Ellers issues bonds. They advise for bonds for the city. And so every person I talk to at the city continues to say, well, we've issued so many bonds that we're actually tapped out for this year, but in 2026, because equalized value, we can issue a bunch more bonds because Eller said we can keep issuing bonds in perpetuity because our equalized value.
Keeps
And I
going up.
think what Pat and I think what I'm hearing from Gary and I think what I'm hearing from constituents is, hey, you shouldn't just because you can, right? And so what I would say with this whole thing and with when I'm dealing with the city now is, what are the potential drawbacks to something like this? Because the only thing I've ever heard is we have to, this is a great deal. This is great, great, great. And I'm not saying it's not great. The fact that we got a developer that's going to do this, but those dollar amounts at the front end are commitments from us that live in Ashland, right?
Right, which is why I asked the question about why aren't they using TIF revenue bonds instead? Because that way the city is not going, just hitting on their general obligation bonds and having the public as a backfall on it. The TIF itself, the increment should pay for those, is paying for those bonds. That's part of the expenses. Let me go back to it. I emailed this to everyone by the way too, so it's in the packet, so. It's kind of hard to read on here because obviously the screen is, but let's blow it up as much as we can. So the bonds, they're gonna get an increment of in 28 of 519,000. The bond payment is gonna be 333,000. So the increment is gonna pay for that. Not you and I, but the increment, the additional taxes on that parcel that resulted from the building being constructed, the apartment buildings. So that's essentially what the taxes are going to be on that building. So they do the debt expense, and then the balance is being given to the developer as an incentive. So debt first, balance goes to the developer. So the bad part about using general obligation bond is it does limit the city's ability to bond in the future in a case of an emergency. The city's well over 50% of their allowable levy, debt levy. Cities are allowed to, well, every government, local government, counties too, you're allowed to bond at 5% of your equalized value. It's a total max. So to put an example, Ashland County's equalized value is for 2024. And oh, yes, sorry. Equalized value for 24 is $1.9 billion, right? So we're allowed to bond 5% of that, which I believe comes up to about $80 million. To put that in perspective, we borrowed 2.1 million. Oh, we actually only borrowed 1.7 or 8 because part of our debt was the lease payments and stuff that we're allowed to do. So we're at 2% of our ability. So yeah, the general obligation part does put a risk on city taxpayers. It also hampers the ability of the city to do projects in the future. That's why I did ask him about TIF revenue instead, because then you still have your general obligation available. And then the TIF is definitely paying for it as opposed to taxpayers.
So this is, Pat, tell me if this is accurate or not. So within the city's going to borrow more because of this, and I understand it, and I will support this because in the long run, it's good. We need housing. It's been top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
So it adds to housing. So if you increase the supply, we would anticipate that rents will be a little softer than otherwise, especially if part of Northland becomes housing. But it'll also will mean that houses are probably going to sell for a bit less in Ashland going forward once this housing becomes available. Ashland should become more affordable. That should lower our assessed values. The city of Ashland is still, they're probably going to have to raise their mill rate a bit more than otherwise because of this. So in the city, they're still going to collect what they need to collect. But for our county taxes, the Ashland School District taxes, and the tech school taxes, if our assessed values drop a bit because of this going forward after they come online, then our share of the county taxes and the school taxes will be a little bit lower than otherwise. Some of that burden will then be shifted outside the city limits. So there will be an indirect benefit to city taxpayers if our assessed values get a little softer. Of course, if you want to sell your house, it won't sell for quite as much potentially.
Well, the other benefit is too, it could lead to a small migration of people to the area. It could lead to more children in the school, which helps the school funding. since they get funding per capita from the state. Um, it enables our employers to hire people who have a stable living place. Not to mention just children in general having a stable home is a huge issue. Um, it it does all in all, it really does help the city and the county and the school district. Um, it's a good project. I don't think the city's going out on a limb here. I think, the only danger is the project doesn't happen. But the developer knows what the cost of lumber is now with the tariffs on Canada. So the developer knows what the cost of steel is with the tariffs. I mean, so I don't think that's going to stop it now. It increased the cost, but I mean, they're still willing to go forward.
So the agenda item we're on our goals and priorities for 2025. So this is a piece of it, this housing issue in front of us. Other things, goals and priorities for 2025, Brad?
I just have a real quick question on the anticipated project cost. It says there's 4.8 for street and utility infrastructure and 400,000 for park improvements. And when you look at that table that you just had up there, it has project expenditures, and I don't see where those fall under the expenditures. So where is that money gonna be coming from? Is that just regular tax dollars?
No, see, there's another debt issue here in 2041. So that's where that money would come from.
Okay, so that money that's going there is that up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and if for some reason, they're able to get a higher increment and pay off the note earlier, and they may want to use the incentives because they also have money budgeted for future incentives too. Sorry, this thing here. Let me try this page over.
Mr. Boussaint?
Right. I wanted to bring up a topic which maybe fits appropriately under goals and priorities for 2025. I was going to wait for the Northland discussion, but I see a potentially affordable near-term opportunity as a piece of that, and maybe that would be good for discussion at this point in time. Deferring to the chair on that question.
Sure, I think that's appropriate. So
Microphone.
Northern College is going to liquidate some properties, and they're hiring a realtor to sell some parcels and housing. And some of it's off of Highway 118, all those parcels are referred to as the Maxwell property. So Mr. Boussaint's been in touch with Northland, Erica Lang from Landmark Conservancy, and looking into what, if anything, the county can do to help keep those properties protected through a conservation easement. You want to turn your mic on when you sit down?
Thank you.
Okay, so I see this as a potentially affordable, because it depends on what we think we have to do with our money, interim opportunity for Ashland County. And you can see there the printing of the parcel indications, which are partly in Ashland County and partly in Bayfield County. So first thing I want to point out that in our comprehensive plan, our existing comprehensive plan, we endorse to provide maintenance and expansion of tourism industry in the county. And we encourage the preservation and protection of environmental corridors for wildlife, water quality values, and habitat protection. So these are part of our goals and objectives in our existing comprehensive plan. So Northland was given as a gift in two parts over the years by the Bradley family, a parcel in the northwest corner of the county, which is off of Highway 118, which is in a preservation status and used by the college for recreational purposes, training, their recreational outdoor education programs. And it is It is on the White River, which is a predefined and designated a wild river corridor from Maple Ridge down to the dam, with very steep clay banks of 100 feet above the river, very subject to gullying and erosion. But the property that the college owns on Highway 118 has trails, hiking trails. It's a beautiful property. And I would say that I remember when I was in high school here, there were very few places in northern part of, excluding the islands, in the northern part of the county for recreation. We would go down to Morgan Falls, which was hardly a known entity back in those days. You just went there for grouse hunting. I mean, nobody knew where Morgan Falls was. And now it's a highly appreciated and much used recreational facility in the county. So I see here an opportunity to possibly intervene to preserve this piece of land in a recreational and conservation status by negotiating with Northland College, whether Ashland County might stand in as a short-term intermediary before it could be put into a conservancy of some type, possibly with state funds out of the Knowles Nelson stewardship funding. But the dilemma is, as I see it, is that Northland College is likely to be in a cash crunch. I mean, I don't know that for a fact right now, but I imagine their cash flow is not good, and that they will probably need to spin off some of their more easily marketable assets in the near future, and that we could lose the opportunity to keep this land in preservation. And in speaking with a representative from the college, Todd Heido, I spoke with, it seems to be their intent to want to keep this land in preservation and for public access and for recreation with the hiking trails. But, you know, if they need the money, they need the money. The other piece of it is because the one parcel there that belongs to Bayfield County is adjacent to several DNR held properties already on the river. But if they sold that Bayfield property individually, it would become landlocked property. So they would really like to take the whole piece, the 30-odd acres in Bayfield County and the 90-odd acres in Ashland County in one piece in a transfer and keep it in a conservancy status if they could. And by the way, if they could afford to do so. Now, one problem is that if working with the DNR or going to the state for stewardship funds or raising money for like Landmark Conservancy, it's a time-consuming process. And we might not be able to do that quickly enough to meet the college's needs for cash. So it seems to me there's a possibility that the county could intervene in an interim status and then possibly fund this acquisition if it's a reasonable acquisition, and then pass it on to recover some of that funding from the state and or other sources and keep it in public access for recreation and conservation in the future. So just wanted to bring to the attention of the committee, and I think it perfectly fits with our county goals and objectives if we could afford it.
Dan?
So I did talk to Mark AA about this. Yeah. And he thought that the counties together should pursue the parcels in our respective counties as long as the price was reasonable. Because for a large part, the same reason that the state would take too long to get going. So, I mean, if this committee is okay with it, I will at least have a conversation. But yeah, we would make whatever, and if we did so, we would make whatever agreement they wanted to keep it in however conservation they want to keep it. So with the caveat that it has to be open for public use because it's public property.
So we don't have this specifically on the agenda, so I don't think it's appropriate we vote on it. But if the administrator and Mr. Bousset, who is chairing our comprehensive plan update, and so he's pointing to some things on the previous plan which are likely to be in the future plan, is there any objection to them having conversations to pursue this? I'm supportive of them pursuing it, to have had some conversations. Mr. Bousset?
So I want to add one piece of information. You know, there already is parking, access to the property, and hiking trails already developed on the property. So it's ready for recreational use by the public right now.
Yeah, and I go by there coming and going to the farm every time and, you know, it's a beautiful view. I like it the way it is and I'd hate to see that change. It's also, to me at least, worth noting, you know, if you think about where the White River heads, you know, out to Bad River, and what they're dealing with Line 5, regardless of how that turns out, you know, it is protecting a watershed that when you look at, you know, where it heads, it's an area that we have a strong interest in protecting also. Brad?
Yeah, I have no objections. I think it's a great idea. I think it's also probably better to move quickly because I see from the original transfer deed that the restrictions that were originally placed on it are no longer valid. And so if another landowner were to do it, the conservation portion could be lost.
Just an additional
Mr.
point of
Buffet?
information.
Go ahead.
The restrictions on that portion in Ashland County have expired 2 years ago. But the restrictions on the portion in Bayfield County, which was donated to the college at a later date, expire, I think, in 2036. But the Ashland County restrictions definitely have expired.
And it should be noted that because of that steep bank from talking to Mr. Brisset, and he's next door to this, just to the west, is because of that bank, they weren't able to put it in forest crop. So, you know, to the county, it has limited value as far as, you know, could we, you know, potentially log it at some point, but the same is going to be true to other people. They're just not going to be able to log that because of the bank. And then because of the steepness, as far as putting in a septic system, it has to be well off the river because of the bank. So it all should lead to a fairly reasonable price, provided we get there. Mary Jo, do you want to come up to the mic, please? Sure, well, if, as long as the committee is okay with you. You're our land and water department head, so.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things about the property. There is a building out there, so there is going to be some overhead, you know, costs for electric, maintenance, that sort of thing. And then if you guys move forward with this, you know, you just have to think too about, like who's going to take over management of it? Would forestry absorb that? Whatever department. So that's just another thing for consideration.
One possibility, depending on how it shakes out, if the Northland College Alumni Association has an interest in having a location to gather, they might be interested in some contribution to the overhead and maintenance of that building as Dan and others have conversations. 2025 priorities, I guess, Erica, things I think about yet is we've got housing in Ashland. If these apartments are built and Northland is in part housing, that helps with housing in an area. I know at North Country Lumber from conversations we had with a meeting with Mellon on housing, I believe back in January, I was kind of surprised at how many people drive a long distance from there. I know one of the guys that's in management there, I've known him for years. I didn't realize so many people drive so far. So one question I would have is, if there's more housing in Ashland and it's affordable, how much would that help Mellon? So as we look at Mellon and housing, if Ashland's housing is more affordable and more of it, how much does that help? I don't know the answer, but I'd be curious. But then I think about Down County more because, you know, having growing up in a rural area, you know, I realize once the population starts leaving for all sorts of reasons, it's hard for whatever's left for stores, businesses, you name it. And then people start saying, can I somehow pay my property taxes? And then things get sold outside, you know, to people not from the area that are actively living here and contributing to the local economy and participating in local things. So, you know, I think about what can we do to help local businesses there. When the board approved the grant writing position, the comments I remember from the Down County supervisors were, you know, can we do things to help the forestry industry, value added products and stuff? And I don't know what we can do, but if there are things related to that, I'm just recalling, you know, comments made by the board earlier. So anything else on this, Erica?
I guess the one thing I would ask is, as I understand it, the Ashland projects are all going to be market rate housing and apartments. So we then have to ask the question, affordable for whom? Because Mellon in particular is on the list, the short list of municipalities whose low and middle income meaning actually fairly low, for, CDBG grants, for sort of everything else, that the income is low enough that they qualify for a whole lot of assistance in other ways. So I don't know that more middle-class housing or market rate housing in Ashland would help out Mellon in its crunch all that much
I-
at all.
I don't know. I'm just curious.
I actually, I
Brett-
think,
Brett?
I'm not a expert by any means, but I think it does because right now there's people that are living in houses that are not what they want to live in, but they want to live in the area and they're paying a lot because they can, and the landlords can get that. As soon as there's more flood on the market, those ones that people aren't going to live are going to go down. And I think that's going to be countywide, and even having 150 units will even spill over to Bayfield and maybe attract some people that have been leaving Ashland to go to Washburn for some of the benefits, maybe even come back into our town. I think any housing, and even if it's a $10 million house, is going to help having nice houses, because there are a lot of people that can afford nice things and there's nothing for them here, so that they want to live here. They're doing anything, and that's all rents are going up. And I really think supply demand, it will help the whole county, is my feeling.
Dan?
And as far as like Mellon in particular, I've had conversations with the mayor down there, and they don't have much interest in workforce housing. Now, they do have a new mayor who I talked to yesterday, or yeah, Wednesday. And so there may be a new opening down there. So Eric and I are going to meet with him after he gets sworn into office. So we will talk to them about workforce housing down there. They have an area that the city owns that already has water running to it that could possibly be used. So we will, and of course, the city can set up a TIF district too.
Let's move on to the next one for now, and we can come back to the goals and priorities at the next meeting and have that on the agenda again. The one item that I really wanted to see all of us here for, and it's taken a while for that to happen, is the next one, policy for providing funds to outside organizations, just some basic guidelines of what we're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, if you give me an idea of what you want, I'll come up with a policy for you guys to tinker with.
Blake?
I guess there's been a lot of controversy with cutting funding for various people that have been getting it from the county for a long time. I know that there was an article in the paper about LaPointe, about that whole thing about their police that was just now in the paper. They're still trying to get some monies from us to pay for their police, which is 4 years ago before I even got on here. So then we had the AADC situation. We've had, with Laura Negro and the Ashland Aging. I think I'm really glad to see this on here so that people know what they need to come here and ask how they come here. I still don't have a good sense sometimes of all the funds we're giving, even though we're on the finance committee and we're going through budget, it gets to be a little mushy. So I think this is good. And my sense is if we make it simple and easy to do, it'll create a lot of people that'll be able to do it. And so I think that was our confusion last year, is people would give us different things and it wasn't what we wanted. And then they'd give us more things and we would still not be knowing what we're actually looking at. So just getting a template. And I think maybe Pat, you've thought this through a little bit.
Well, the city of Ashland has a policy, and at the time I was there, they had to be submitted by the 1st of September. And because the city has 2, 3, 4 budget meetings at least a year, depending on the year, that gave enough time to go through iterations. So it was just your basic budget. What are you going to use it for? And then they also had to submit a report on what they used the money for the prior year. So it wasn't onerous, but at the same time, some organizations are small, maybe it's related to snowmobile trails, and they're all volunteers, and that's fairly simple. You don't want to be onerous, but then something else that's more involved, and they do other things and money comes from other sources, then the question is, well, can you tell me specifically what you're doing with the money the county gives you that you otherwise couldn't do? That's helpful because then you actually have a sense of, is this making a difference or not, or is it going into a big pot? And if we're giving them money, I would also like to see transparency, because if these are tax dollars, and they are, then whether that organization, is private or not, if we're given tax dollars, we should get documentation on where that money's going and not be told, hey, that's private, we're not going to tell you where those tax dollars go. And the other thing I think that would be helpful is if they do something where part of it we're required to do for whatever reason, state law, federal law, that we understand what part we're meeting a requirement, and then what part, if it's extra and optional, they're going above and beyond, we know what that part is and what that budget looks like. But we need a deadline on this. One of the challenges we've run into is we ask for stuff, and we've had, Dan and I last year, we had a really hard time getting stuff from people ahead of a meeting. So it was in the packet and so we could project. And department heads have been really, really good about working together, working with Dan, getting things in on time. I've been really happy with that. But the private organizations or the things that we contributed, that was just the hardest part of getting somewhere. So deadlines are important. Dan?
Well, I think whatever we do, it needs to apply to everybody. We can't say, well, no, the Snowmobile Alliance doesn't have to do this because they're so small and they're volunteers. They can turn over basic information. They have an accountant. I do think the aging unit is a very special situation because we have both state and federal law that require us to pay for Meals on Wheels. So that is the portion we're paying for, food. So I think that, but Laura could still get us more information sooner. I think we can all agree on that. And if we want to I think next meeting we should set a date, and I can come up with a policy based on what you guys say. But I think we should have everything in hand by August 1st, if at the latest, because to be honest, we're looking to pass our budget last Tuesday in October.
And August 1st would give us time to ask further questions or further information. So not too onerous on the front end, because we heard this 5 years ago when I started on finance. For some organizations, it was just too onerous. But at the same time, there's others where you want to delve into more detail. And then sometimes a year is very different from the previous year. If you got a lot of snow, maybe that groomer wears out more than a year or two where it doesn't snow. And another organization where they're working out of, maybe that changes during the year. And for whatever reason, their budgets are very different because of things that are different, So any other questions or comments or suggestions, Mary Jo?
I just have a thought. It could be, you have two things. You have a policy. So your policy creates your guidance, your guidelines that you're going to require people to abide by. And then you could have a simple form that's like a grant application, has a deadline, a simple form where you're the name of the agency, the amount of money requesting, the purpose, the project description. And then you have a template where every person that's requesting funding is filling out the same thing that you can compare side by side when you guys go to make decisions on, what you want to fund or how much money you have available.
And that's in general what the city had, and then like a grant report at the end. So you're getting two things. Once you get in the cycle, you're getting the report from what did you do last year? And then what are you asking for this year and why? And then there's an opportunity to ask for more information, which isn't any different than what the department heads go through during budget season. It's a process. So we want things soon enough so there's time for that process. And if there are one or more groups, we have time for more questions without being so onerous on the front end, getting everything at once, that for a smaller group, it's, not onerous because we don't want to deter volunteers. Anything else? Dan will draft something for us then?
Yeah, unless you guys have other things you want.
just a simple draft, then we can take another look at it. We're well ahead of August 1st at the moment. Okay. Anything else? Then moving to the Northland College closure, that's an item. Do you want on the previous?
Just, I have to excuse myself because if anyone here knows the news, we had an election the other night that didn't go very well. So I have a meeting in an hour and a half, so I'm going to excuse myself
Okay.
to take care of some political problems.
All right.
Okay.
Good luck.
Hey,
The Northland College closure, that's just an open item in case anyone wants to discuss anything related to that. Blake?
Well, Erica, thank you for sending that email. I did get it. I read it. I reached out to Sheldon Johnson at Northwest Regional Planning, and then he mentioned that, what had other colleges done? So then I mentioned it to Erica. She did some research, and, I think obviously it's not a great thing that this is closing, but hopefully there's an opportunity. Northland doesn't have virtually much debt at all. And I think the assets there are worth something. But I think we at the county have a simple balance sheet. We've talked about a business park. So I think, we want to be at the table. And really, that's what we just want to continue to talk about is giving Dan some like, hey, because there's some fairly heavy hitters, Ponzio, Mr. Allen, and then Mr. Hegstrom, and I think just reaching out and talking. So again, I want to make sure that we're ready because at June 1st, lights go out and we as a community now are having to pick up the pieces.
Mr. Busset?
Does anybody, like, you have any sense of what their cash flow position is, their liquidity?
I don't have a sense of cash flow. And I think that they're all under NDAs. They can't talk at the level. And so there's no communication really. Todd Pito at the building has kind of talked a little bit about facilities, but there's a lot of things that we want to be planning for. We just can't right now. And I think with Dan, he understands that we want to be a part of it if we can be. We just don't know yet.
Other questions, comments?
I think
Jim?
my guess is their cash flow situation is not very good at this point. I think they're going to run out of cash very quickly, which is why they're moving to sell some of these properties right away. And that's just looking in from the outside. I mean, I could be completely wrong, but when you have a cut date on your employees and you're looking to get rid of properties immediately, that indicates to me there's financial distress. So
the thing I keep thinking about, and bear in mind, I live just a block north of Northland College, and so this one really strikes home to me, is if that gym and the building where they now have that exercise equipment, the one that used to be the pool, if those two could be turned into a Y, this might be a great opportunity while the buildings are there, the equipment is there. And then, I've reached that age where I now deal with Medicare. And one of the things I realized the other day was that if I had somewhere to go to actually exercise, apparently Medicare and some insurance plans will fund the fee or part of the fee for, going to a Y or something. So Blake had said earlier when he was working on Y-related stuff that I believe 150,000 for a study. So I think about how could we kickstart a study somehow? And with those assets there before they're liquidated, while that equipment is in those buildings, is there an opportunity for a conversation? A Y there would bring people to the campus if there's other retail and things going on at the campus, so it bring traffic if there's businesses there. And then I also wonder, the person who renovated the building that was the pool, if that person would have any interest in helping to facilitate those two buildings, the gym and the building that was the pool, transforming that into a Y, because potentially there could be some financial incentives, tax incentives that would help that that person could accrue if they were interested in helping with that transition. So, I'd just like to get on this sooner than later while we still have that opportunity. Anything else on Northland for the moment? Okay. Then we'll go to the next one. In the packet, there was some data on the federal government reduction in force. It's background to help us understand their importance to our local area. Any questions or comments on this?
Just comment that there seems to have stabilized. Nobody else is losing their jobs. So that remains to be seen, of course, but it is somewhat stable. I know the Washburn Ranger Station is now staffing the visitor center. And it's driving the state employees nuts. But so they're at least trying to keep the place open. And I don't know if you saw that Congressman Tiffany wants to reintroduce his perk. I'm just kind of wondering where the employees are going to come from to manage that perk. But
Brad?
You said that you think it's stabilizing, but I keep hearing that there's still going to be a reduction in force, and there was plans put forward that are moving forward with, USDA, so the Forest Service in Washburn,
maybe, I mean, the only thing I can say is I don't know what this administration is going to do tomorrow.
well, that's true too, but I thought that they all submitted just a couple weeks ago, had to submit up to a 40% reduction in force for every federal agency. That if that was just submitted, it probably hasn't even been reviewed yet to know. And so I would say I don't think it's slowed down. I think they're actually maybe looking at it closer to do it more efficiently. I thought I heard even yesterday that several agencies were offering a new buyout package to get that in. So while the agencies here might be less affected with some of this new stuff, I think it's still, like you said, we don't know what's going to happen. What might have happened right now that we haven't seen because we're in this meeting, but because it's so unpredictable. But I think it's still a concern, and I appreciate having it on here because to see that it's 3% of our tax base, and it's good paying jobs, it's something we have to be concerned about.
April 13th is the date that I've been hearing from some folks on when those things are due, and we might get another round potentially. Erica?
Just wanted to add some numbers to this. So if roughly 150 federal workers in the area have been laid off, 2.5 to 3%, it's equaled by the number of people laid off by Northland. That it's just about 150 people as well. So we're looking at probably 5 to 6% of the total middle class jobs in the Bay in 1 year are gone.
Well, and then add that to the coming recession.
Let's go to 5A, the grant writer update.
Yeah, so I think everything I need to tell you is in the little 3 pages, 2 of it, the miniaturized spreadsheet of our total grants. As you might guess, forecasting federal and state grants is like really, really, really difficult right now. Even some grants that we currently hold, like our FEMA pre-disaster mitigation for riprap and securing the eastern side of Madeline Island, feels like it's under threat if FEMA itself is going to go through cuts. So we're doing the best we can. We're going to submit 4 congressionally directed spending requests. My plan, because we don't know about those congressional requests, right? And we won't know for some time. My plan after that is to then try to map out what we can as a calendar of other possible grants for those 4 important projects. And then otherwise, possibly we can look back at CDBG and other state administrated grants for both departments in the county and municipalities in the county. and then honestly try to be as nimble as we can with what comes down the pike.
Questions, comments? Yeah,
Just a quick comment on the Ice Angel. I sent Bad River a sample letter of support yesterday, and I got a signed copy back today. And same with Iron County. They got me back one in one day. And Bayfield County should have one this week.
so Erica, what is your sense, the way things are now, what types of projects are most likely to get funded?
At the federal level, so I get an email report about every single federal grant that is posted every single day. And for the past 2.5 months, I have identified one that we could possibly apply for, but that the department that it would have gone under did not have the capacity at this time to execute the work that it would take, to just do the work of, what we would write for. So the things that are being posted are not applicable to us. And honestly, I don't know what has been approved in the past 2 months, because things that we've applied for last July and then late summer haven't even been taken up. We have not been given, even the receipt of like, this has been downloaded to be read by someone, right? So this is now 7-8 months later. I'm sorry, I can't really answer that question. I do know that CDBG is functional right now. They have money, they have caps on money, but they are doing their work and they are looking to push out money.
So I wonder on future agendas if it would make sense, asking us about our priorities as if either before that, just before it, an update from you, or concurrently make it one agenda item. Because it's one thing to say, here's what we would like to see. It's quite another in this day and age to say, where are some possible sources of funding? And if we had that conversation together with you on project updates, if you could give us some ideas where and when potentially we might get funding. So as I'm looking at the federal government, my guess is that we got this debt ceiling coming up in June, July, or maybe sooner, the way, things are going. And then the tax cuts that they want to pass is maybe once we get through that, because that seems to be their overriding objective.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe once we get through that, then some of the other things will return to a more typical level that we were used to prior to this year.
I do think something that would be useful to me, and I have started this. So I've contacted the leaders of every municipality in the county, asking them, what are your short and long-term needs? And can you just send me an email when you identify something so that I can keep an eye out for things? So far, only 2 municipalities have gotten back to me, and not with any specifics, just like, hey, wonderful, we will, thank you. But it would really help if supervisors would keep their ear to the ground too, just to tell me what is needed, because it's hard for me to prioritize anything when I don't know exactly what it is we need, and I don't know what sort of money is available, because it's just not, there is nothing available now. Yeah, Blake.
Most grants are frozen right now. I do think that's going to open up again fairly soon. There's a lot of red states that are heavily dependent on federal grants. And so the administration is going to feel pressure from Congress and governors to reopen those up. So I think that's coming. I think they're just trying to figure out which ones. I think they're going through all of them and getting rid of language they don't like. And projects that they may not like may get stopped. But in general, most of them are going to come back just reshaped and worded. because there's so many red states that depend on these.
Blake?
Dan's gonna love that I bring this up. So there's a Wisconsin Township Association's board meeting quarterly that they have in Bayfield County. They've tried to have one in Ashland County. There's a lady that's on one that I work with, and every time she comes and tells me how important it is and why we in Ashland County are not doing what we should be doing by incentivizing blah, 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 blah. So here I am, and you say the greatest thing ever because you said mind sharing. No, it's great. Okay, these people in Bayfield County, the townships, they come together, they talk about things, they hear about funding, they hear about grants. And I think that's a priority that I didn't say earlier, but flushing out how do we improve our connectivity at the township and the municipalities within the Ashland County? You going to that meeting is a great thing. If you aren't yet,
I've been to the last 3.
Great.
And I'm on the agenda for June.
and I think making Dan go too. I'm just kidding. It's a very good thing. I've heard only a lot of the people in Ashland County complain about driving, so they tried the building they were going to do it at, didn't work. But I think we should be at the county board because we're the entire county, should be really promoting our towns and our municipalities to be coming to these things. I'll get off my soapbox.
Well, this is Pat, having property and growing up in Bayfield County. I will tell you, even though I really don't follow the local stuff out there, I just go there to get away. Bayfield County and those townships working together, they really, really have benefited by how they're doing that out there because individual townships, it's harder than if you get together and talk. And part of that has been just the opportunity to apply for funding for road improvements by working together on that, that and some other things. It really has been beneficial. I'm quite impressed with it, actually.
To address that one issue, Matt Erickson does work with all the towns together for road improvements.
And Matt does go to those meetings, and I
Yeah,
think he
they're-
benefits because I think hearing that stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm not, but I do thank you for going.
No problem. I'm always looking for a room to lecture to still.
Anything else on grant writer update? Then we'll go to 5B treasurer report.
Interest rates are going to start going down again. I mean, I think they changed recently and
Today they're going down, but they weren't going to go down until just the Trump tariffs on. So we don't know.
right. So anyhow, Tracy is getting rate updates every month. And they're subject to change by whatever happens with the Fed. So, you want to do
Okay, so Blake,
Do we move on to the sales tax? I'm sorry. I didn't-
well, so Dan just mentioned county investments. Those are there. Any questions or comments? If none, then we'll go to sales tax revenue, which is down about 4% this year compared to the prior year.
Yeah, it started out great, and then the last two. So we're down year over year if you add the first 3 months. And how do we come up with the variances? How is it so variable?
I've been wondering that myself. I will warn you guys, I am worried about this trend. We do see, this is the first signs of a recession coming, and I don't know, because March would be December's sales tax, would be January's numbers. So, November was high as can be, and then Christmas drops quite a bit, and
But that's typical over the last 5 years that March, so, it's been.
yeah, it's
But
typical.
March has been low. It's typical. We had a huge, I guess, December, so the February in 2024, that makes it look, that looks like an outlier to me for some reason. I think, yes, concerning, but I think when we see February we might see it high based off of the number of people you saw out on the water fishing. I mean,
Yeah.
you couldn't drive by there and not, it looked like some of those cities on some of those lakes out there.
Oh, yeah, for the neighborly fishing contest, I mean, that bay was,
It's just, it was nuts. And so I know a lot of those are local, but there's also a lot of that come up, and maybe we see that jump back up and get back on track once we get February included. Maybe not though, but then that ice season also ended quick, and that's the big driver up here. We also didn't have great snow this year for snowmobile trails. There was never any, so we probably lost some of the snowmobile revenue. And so that's going to be the bigger issue, is what brings people here in the winter, or to buy stuff. You know, that hotel revenue is what really probably drives a lot of this, I would think.
yeah. And we don't really have much coming up soon. I mean, smelting is gonna start pretty soon, which will bring a bunch of people up here. But
I guess given the volatility, it's a little hard to read too much into it yet. I think I agree with Brad. Because the first month we were all excited and now we're kind of like, yeah, maybe not. So I guess after maybe a month or two more, we can then start drawing some more conclusions.
Administrator updates, anything else that you haven't hit?
I think we covered everything.
All right, and then that gets us to scheduling the next meeting. So you think on the truck,
I think she'll buy it this week.
we'll be okay with that. So you got a board meeting the 29th, if I recall. The sheriff HVAC, as far as you need a finance meeting before that or not?
I don't think we need, one now. I mean, if you guys want to meet to give formal approval for the TIF, we could.
So we had,
So the finance committee can make the recommendation to the county board.
so we had talked about the sheriff HVAC back in February. If I recall correctly, there was support for doing the project. We just wanted more bids. So as long as they've got more bids, or is the committee okay with the bids going to the county board for consideration at the end of the month?
Yeah, we're still waiting on one more. The day of the last county board meeting, Johnson Controls came and looked also. So, and Brian asked him, instead of just ask him for a full replacement like the other ones, but also, is there a repair you can do that would last 20 years? You know, that might be $200,000 instead of $700,000. So he's just asking me.
So next meeting,
We don't.
we don't, it doesn't sound like. Somewhere in May, and before we get to late May.
Doesn't look like there's anything scheduled in May on the calendar yet, so.
So any of you have days that are better or just don't work, or afternoon again? We did move this one to 2:30 to accommodate. He had an airport commission related meeting at 2, so. I'm open, so those of you with more.
Yeah, it's becoming a busy time of the year for me that I can't commit yes or no until the, ice is all gone and we are done with our spring work, but we won't know that until the ice is completely gone. So
Would May 15th then, maybe?
I hope to be done by May 8th, but
You should.
but if we get another couple gales like we just have had the last time, that slows us down too. So it won't matter, and the later we go, then other stuff starts picking up. So May 8th should work fine as best.
I'm fine. I mean, the 15th, or
It's
it's
really up to you. I mean,
any
Brad-
preference?
Doesn't matter to me.
Brad's gonna have the same problem for every meeting.
Yeah. From now, especially being short-staffed, it's
So May 8th at 2 o'clock? Okay. And then a motion to adjourn? Mr. Pufo? Ron makes a motion, we adjourn.
Blake will second.
Blake is second, all in favor? Aye? All right.